Okay, so that's the first introduction to Lost Treasures on the Old Spanish Trail. If you want to get the book, I think it's available at Amazon. You can probably get Lost Treasures on the Old Spanish Trail by George A. Thompson. And you can follow along and you'll be able to understand a little bit better what I'm talking about and where some of these references are at. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you can learn something from these interesting stories. Chapter 1, The Legend of Cibola, or Cibola, however you want to say it. In the time of Columbus, it was well known that in about the year 750 AD, a bishop of Lisbon had sailed into the unknown Western Sea and reached a land where there were 7 cities, very rich in gold. Even at that early date, some called them the 7 cities of Cibola. In 1482, Cibola was shown on the latest maps prepared by Gracius Benincasa. He placed that fabled land on the island of Antilla, somewhere across the unknown Western Sea near the very edge of the world. Spanish adventurers, then the world's greatest sailors, remembered the ancient legend of the 7 cities, which told of a rich land sometimes called Cibola and sometimes called Antilla. The possibilities of more gold than the world had ever known didn't go unnoticed at the royal court of Spain's King Ferdinand V and Queen Isabella. If Cibola was an island, why not sail westward to it? And so the dream of Cibola was born anew. The first treasure hunter to seek Cibola was Christopher Colon, the man now remembered as Christopher Columbus. Although others sought to be first, circumstances dictated that Columbus would be the first to sail into the unknown in the service of the king. Contrary to what some have said, his first goal was gold, not Christianity, and the discovery of new lands. He was looking for Cibola and nothing else. As early as 1490, Columbus had written, "Gold is most excellent. Of gold is treasure made. With gold the man who possesses it does all that he desires in the world, and they even send souls to paradise." The official agreement made on April 17, 1492, between Columbus and the royal court stated in part that all and whatever merchandise, whether it be pearls, precious stones, gold, silver, spices, and other things, however it might be discovered, acquired, or obtained, he may take for himself the 10th part of all of them and do with it as he will. The other 9 parts remain for His Highness. The hardships of that historic voyage of 1492 need not be repeated here. Suffice it to say that upon his return to Spain, Columbus received a magnificent reception, honors, and a title in return for his discovery of a land fair and rich for planting, for building towns and villages, and as much gold as His Highness may need, spices and cotton, and 1,000 other precious things. And if anyone doubted his claim, he had nuggets of the purest gold to show them. In all, Columbus made 4 voyages to the New World, in 1492, 1493, 1498, and 1502. He discovered the Bahamas, Cuba, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, and Trinidad. Later he explored the coast of America north from Honduras to the Yucatan, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and other places in the land of Montezuma, now Mexico. His exact landing sites and places of exploration can't be located precisely because of the inaccurate maps of the period. But if we could retrace the last journey of Columbus, we might be able to locate what no doubt became America's first lost mine. In 1503, Columbus sent a report from the Indies to his king. On the 6th of February, when it rained continually, I sent 70 men inland for 5 leagues, where they found many mines of gold. The Indians brought them to a very high mountain where they showed them places as far as the eye could see, saying that in every part there was gold enough, and towards the mine that there was gold enough, and towards the west the mine stretched for 20 days. He returned to Spain to organize a better prepared expedition. Unfortunately, he died before he could return to the New World. Where are his mines of gold today? Note that upon the arrival of Columbus and the very first European explorers of record in the New World, native Indians showed them places where they had already mines of gold and silver. Mining was not something the Indians learned from the Spanish, as some suppose, but something they had already engaged in for centuries. But their interest in the precious metals was not to gain wealth, but rather for personal adornment and as a trade item. And some of the groups, some of the tribes, it was much more important than it was to others. The more developed societies like the Aztec, the Incas, the Mayas, they had a desire for gold and silver to adorn their temples, and because it was a part of their religion. Whereas the smaller tribes, those that were the poorer groups of people that were living hand to mouth, gold was merely to them a trade item. You know, they might have used a nugget in their little pouch that they wore around their neck, their medicine bag, or in a specific ceremony, but they didn't use it like the larger tribes to the south, the Aztec, the Inca, and the Maya. So it was a trade item for them. They were able to obtain things from trade through mining gold and silver. Gold, native silver, and to a lesser degree copper were malleable metals easily melted, or hammered into desired shapes and forms, or fashioned into bracelets and other ornaments. Indians who had such metals or the trinkets made from them could trade for seashells, brightly colored feathers, and other desirable things which other tribes had. Gold especially was so soft that it could be hammered into thin sheets to cover temple walls, or when melted into many forms such as the idols which represented their gods. During recent times, archaeologists using modern carbon-14 and potassium-argon dating methods have proven that the Incas were mining gold as early as 800 years BC, and that by the time of Columbus they were recovering as much as 20 tons of the precious metal every year. The Aztecs of Mexico had accumulated even greater wealth by the same time. The degree of Indian civilization north of Mexico had not developed as highly as that of the Incas or Aztec nations. Nevertheless, native inhabitants of our present western states were not unaware of the trade value of gold, silver, and turquoise, and had mines of their own almost as early as did those nations further south. And so when the Spanish came, they were seeking out these places that were already being mined. They didn't necessarily have to find very many of their own new deposits. We now know that the Indians worked the ancient copper mines at Santa Rita, New Mexico as early as 1200 AD. As recently as 1965, a prehistoric Indian cache was found when the already deep mine shafts there broke into the long sealed workings of an Indian mine. In the cache were 1,200 turquoise beads and 240 pendants, as well as many delicately carved birds and frogs. Many ancient stone hammers and picks were also found at the cache site. Artifacts of the Anasazi found at the Moki ruins, where they once lived, revealed that they had developed metallurgy to some degree and were very fond of metal ornaments. For among the ruins have been found small copper bells, pendants, and trinkets of turquoise. Among the Hohokam ruins of the Gila River, of the Gila River in Arizona, researchers have found many small copper bells, similar to sleigh bells in size, but pear-shaped. The extent of Indian mining during the pre-Spanish period has been proven by many competent authorities. well-known archaeologist F. H. Roberts among them. He has dated Indian turquoise mines 12 centuries before the arrival of the Spanish. He discovered that some of their more sophisticated mines had deep shafts and tunnels as well as stoops, rooms so large that they had to leave pillars of rock as much as 20 feet thick to support them. When the first Americans arrived in the Intermountain West, they first believed that many of the Indian mines they found were of Spanish origin because they didn't believe the Indians were capable of excavating such extensive diggings. Literally thousands of Indian mines found with shafts dug in a zigzag manner to facilitate climbing in and out of them. When they were reopened by American miners, only Indian tools were found, such as shaped stone hammers and mauls. Picks were sharp, narrow instruments made from the hardest stone, while many were fashioned from deer and elk antlers. Drills were made from a sharp-edged stone fastened upon the end of a split hardwood stick and wrapped with wet leather which shrunk as it dried. Those drills were used by rolling them between the hands, while the weight of the body on the opposite end of the stick pressed the sharpest stone point against the ore being drilled. Several such drills have been found in the oldest Indian mines at Grand Gulch, Utah. One of the earliest and most amazing finds of Indian metallurgy by Dorantes de Carranza, a Spanish sailor shipwrecked with Cabas de Vaca and others on the Gulf Coast of Florida in 1527. For 8 years, Dorantes and his companions wandered across the southwest before reaching Culiacan on the coast of Mexico. During their wanderings, they found many signs of copper, gold, and other metals. And at a place now believed to have been the Davis Mountains of Texas, Dorantes was given a small copper bell or rattle with a face etched on it, which the Indians told him came from the north where the bell was cast. Dorantes and his 3 companions were the first Spaniards the Indians had ever seen, and the first white men to cross the southwest. The bell given to them was not of European manufacture, but was definitely of Indian origin, proof positive that the Indians of the north were familiar not only with mining ores, but also with smelting, metallurgy, and casting metals. The wealth of the Indies reported by Columbus created the greatest possible excitement at the court of Ferdinand and Isabella. Soon other nations, including France, Britain, and Portugal, were readying their own fleets to explore and claim their share of the treasure to be found there. It became imperative that Spanish sailors should lose no time in exploring and claiming the newfound El Dorado for his most Catholic Majesty, as well as for His Holiness the Pope of Rome. At that time, the royal courts of Spain and the symbolic and visual representatives of papal authority throughout the Christian world, therefore, by an apostolic bull, decreed by Pope Alexander VI himself, so that the heathen Indians of the New World might be converted to the faith, all of the lands now known or yet to be discovered were to be divided between the kings of Spain and Portugal. Because of Spain's unmatched sea power, as well as the zeal of its monarchs, most of the gold and glory of the New World was claimed by its conquistadors. The Spanish king interpreted the Pope's order as a legitimate title to all lands discovered by his subjects, by whatever means. All that was needed to claim title to a whole new country was a brief ship's landing or even a glimpse of the shoreline. In short order, Spain claimed all of America's Atlantic coast from Florida to Labrador and everything west of the Gulf Coast to the Pacific, even though the Pacific, then the South Sea, hadn't even been discovered. Within only a few more years, they claimed all of the Pacific coast from Panama to the icy shores of Alaska. The land claimed by Portugal were those chiefly in South America, particularly in the Amazon basin. Not to be overlooked was another prize then sought with almost as much fervor and zeal as was Cibola itself, the legendary Straits of Anon. It had long been believed that somewhere north of Mexico a narrow water passage connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, what a century later the British sought as the Northwest Passage. The English navigator Sir Francis Drake described it as being somewhere north of California. There was no doubt in the minds of Spanish sailors that such a passage existed, for as early as 1500, Gaspar Cartriel, a Portuguese, claimed he had actually sailed to Asia through the narrow waterway, while one Father Rinaldi said he too had sailed through Anon, no more than 10 or 12 leagues wide, from China to Grand Tartary. That there was an exploration of the Atlantic coast at such an early date is proven by a map made in 1499 and now in possession of the Royal Geographic Society in London, which clearly depicts the coast of New England as it was explored by John Lloyd, known as John the Skillful, in 1475, 17 years before the first voyage of Columbus. Of equal interest is a world globe made in 1536, which shows the New England area and the Hudson River 110 years before Henry Hudson officially discovered it. The Spanish crown knew that if a king sought after the Straits of Anon, and if they could be found, they would open a shorter route to the markets of Asia. But even more important, they would open a whole new continent for conquest, and somewhere in its vast region was Cibola, the greatest treasure of them all. And for the Pope, there would be vast new lands peopled by native Indians, all with souls to be saved.